Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We once again have a very special guest, Aliya Cycon, joining us from Spain. Hi, Aliya.
Hello.
Welcome back. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself
Yeah,
with the audience?
my name is Aliya Cycon. This is my second time on this channel, talking to the wonderful Dr. Parag. And I play the oud, which is a Middle Eastern stringed instrument. And I live currently in Spain, though I am American. And I have a big passion for music and using music to bring different cultures together, to bring healing, peace, grace, all things like that. So I'm very happy to be here again.
Great. We're so lucky to have you back. And my name is Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a hospice and palliative medicine physician in the US. So, Aliya, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to since we last connected, because I find it difficult to keep up with you. You've been traveling quite a bit, a lot of performances in different countries in Europe. Could you just tell us about your itinerary over the last few months?
Yeah, it was a busy fall. Let's see. In October, I went to Switzerland where they do this fantastic arts residency in a tiny mountain town called Sierre, if I were to try to pronounce it correctly in French. And there it's in this castle, and they bring together artists, politicians, activists, poets, visual artists, musicians, all different kinds of people who are working in the Middle Eastern and Western kind of cultural exchange space. So I was one of 5 musicians that they invited to stay at the residency for a week and collaborate with the other musicians that they had, the other 5, or the other 4. And then we prepared a collaborative concert to be performed at the end of this big conference, the end of this big residency, for all the other people who were invited across all the different disciplines. And it was really cool because half of the group of musicians were from Arabic speaking countries. Half were like myself or not, but maybe specialize in that kind of music. So it was a really interesting collaboration, very magical time. So that was Switzerland. A few weeks after that, I was in France doing 2 performances with this wonderful trio. Where actually, this might be interesting to your audience. The qanun player, which is like a lap harp, it's another Arabic Middle Eastern instrument. The qanun player in that ensemble, he invited me to play with them, so I was an invitee. And he's also getting he also is a doctor. He just got his first residency assignment in France, although he himself is Tunisian. So that was really cool. And then after that, I went to Poland, which is actually where my ancestral roots are from. And my mom was there visiting at the same time. And she's been working with refugees from Ukraine who are currently living in Poland. And I got to make music with some of them because actually she's working with Roma people who came over from Ukraine because they're like the most marginalized people group in this refugee crisis, who've been largely ignored if you think about it, because they're not really considered Ukrainian, but in the same way. So there's a lot of racism, a lot of discrimination. So there's some great organizations that are working with them. So I was really lucky to get to meet them, meet the people working there, meet the refugees, and people of Roma cultures quite naturally tend to be very musical. Some of the music that comes out of those cultures is incredible. So it was really fun to collaborate. And yeah, it was a very culturally rich fall, I guess you could say. That was a very long answer.
No,
Sorry.
no, I was like, wow. I mean, to me, that was pretty concise, to be quite honest, because you've been really busy.
I try to keep it concise.
Yeah, no, no, it was great. It was great. Uh, because I'm sure you have so many stories to tell. Now, tell me about the trip in Switzerland where you mentioned they were very diverse musicians who got together from diverse backgrounds. I'm sure there are times when you get to work with other people where language becomes a barrier, but you're able to overcome it through the music. How does that really work? Because at some point, I guess music transcends that barrier, right? Could you
You're
share your
completely
insights?
right. You're completely right. For the residency, most people spoke English because, you know, English is becoming kind of this universally spoken language, whether we like it or not. So it was very helpful. But even still, even when you share the same like language that you speak, we all came from different musical languages. You know, some had more of a jazz background, some had more of a classical background. That was interesting. Some had a more like fusion contemporary music background like myself. So actually that was really interesting, Parag, because it was trying to figure out how to come up with a concert. I mean, we were total strangers at the beginning of the week, and then we practically lived together for a week, which was part of the residency, and played music all day long and put together a full length, you know, hour and a half long concert in like 5 days, which involved a lot of rehearsing, a lot of sharing our own music with one another and trying to teach it to each other to play it. So even though in that instance the language was not an issue, it was really a fun and cool challenge to try to overcome the musical language barrier. But I will say that in the other two travels I had, so in France and then in Poland, big language barrier situation, because in France, the first city I went to was in Bordeaux. I don't know if I'm saying that right, Bordeaux. And I always try to say like place names a little bit correctly if I can try. Anyways, there people spoke English because it's a pretty big city. But then the second part of the France trip was in a tiny town, which, okay, I'm going to try to pronounce it right, called Issoudun, Issoudun. And it's a tiny, tiny town in the very center of France. So people didn't speak English. And my French, as you might have noticed, is not particularly advanced, although I do try. So that was really interesting to do all that communication. And in that case, the music 100% created the communication bridge, because as soon as you start playing the piece of music, you're all on the same page, you know. Oh, it's such a magical thing. And the same thing happened with my Roma friends in Poland, because I don't speak Polish, even though that's my ancestry, and I certainly don't speak the Romani language that they do, and I don't speak Ukrainian, or Russian. So there were no linguistic, even remote attempts, like even any connection linguistically. So that was purely by body language and music. And love, like a lot of hugging and kind of just eye contact. It's amazing how much verbal communication is only one part of our ability to communicate with one another and be understood, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about your experience in Poland, because it seems like uh, those people are in, of course, quite a suboptimal situation in their lives. And I'm sure the music brings about a lot of comfort.
Yes. Actually, it's really interesting that you said that, because that was one of my questions when we were like getting dinner with the Roma people. Because they're the refugees that the organization was serving, but then the actual organization is also run by Roma people who live in Poland. So they're Polish speaking, completely part of the Polish culture, but would still identify like ethnically as Romani. They still speak they speak the Romani language, and participate in all kinds of Romani culture, music, etc. So we were with them a lot, and I told them, I was like, look, I would love to like learn more about your culture and your experience. So please forgive me if any of my questions are totally like ignorant or politically incorrect, because I'm totally coming from a good place just to learn, which I think it's important to be able to ask questions. And I said, I want to know the answers so that I can then tell other people. So I said, you know, for fear of sounding totally making a generalization, but it would seem to me that people of like a gypsy heritage, flamenco, for example, gitanos, like gypsy jazz, right? You think of the French, that area, for Django Reinhardt, that amazing music style. You think of the Balkans, which is where my husband is from. So like, you know, Balkan gypsy music, like all of these incredible musics and so many more are coming out of Romani people groups who are living in different parts of the world, right? Like, so I said to them, like, why is all that music so exceptionally good? Like, what is this common thread? And they were like, you know, when you're so oppressed and so discriminated against and so persecuted wherever you go, there's something about that suffering, the perpetual poverty, the perpetual like marginalization. There's something about that that makes you that comes through, like the suffering kind of comes through in your expression through art, particularly music and dance. And so, yeah, so that was amazing. And also, one thing that really struck me was the way that they actually, this is related to what I said about Switzerland, the way that they like prepare music, the way they practice it, the way they rehearse it, the way they collaborate with others. Because as someone from like a Western music background like myself, everything's very structured, you know, okay, the rehearsal is at this time and the sound check is at this time and we're going to do this piece and I'm going to send it to you a week in advance so you can learn it and study it at home, you know, very structured. And in the case with these people, because we were preparing like a collaborative concert, there was no prior preparation. And I'm not trying to say that all people of the Roma people group are like that, but it was really an amazing learning experience because I knew that it wasn't my place to just be like, so guys, like, when's the rehearsal? What are we going to play? You know, it was just, I was there to just like be part of their experience, you know, and be totally adaptable. And I didn't want to be that person coming in being like, you know, super, you know, neurotic about things. And we didn't rehearse at all, actually. We reviewed one kind of song, we kind of jammed. It was really more like jamming, in my personal opinion. And then we kind of got up in front of the group that we performed for, which were the other people in the organization. It was very informal, so there was no pressure really. And we just played and we just made it work. And it was, but what I learned from that was like, well, I learned a lot, but one thing I learned is as far as learning about the Roma people group and the way they do music, is that, you know, so much of that ability to express music comes from these just like very natural gatherings of people to make music rather than these like super structured ways to go about it. And I'm not saying that, you know, people of that group are not capable of, you know, doing these sort of high level structured approaches to music, but that the natural sort of cultural way of doing it, from what I saw, of course, was much more spontaneous. And that would align with what I've heard other people say about like learning gypsy jazz from people in that part of France and, you know, learning flamenco. It's not super, super, super academic. It's expressive and it's natural. And you have to kind of jump in the water and learn on the go rather than someone putting like sheet music in front of you and teaching it to you. So, and isn't that totally just getting back to the root of what music really means, isn't it? That it's a way to communicate and express both the beauty of life, but also the suffering of life, and use it as a means of like coming together with your community, actually. So it was really special.
Great. So you have definitely a way with your music and you also have a way with your words. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so there is a fan following of yours within my household, and now it makes sense as to, you know, you're followed on Instagram. So uh, those jam sessions, you know, that you probably had with other artists prior to the performances, you've posted them on your Instagram. So I would highly recommend for our audience to go and check those out. Very interesting, because I was wondering what was going on when I saw some of them.
Oh, you saw
Uh,
that.
yeah, because and it was, yeah, now it all makes sense because you were all trying to come together. And the other interesting thing I just learned from you was, although music is a universal language, there are different languages within music, like, you know, different genres. And so it seems like, from what I'm gathering from you, there is some amount of adjustment when artists from different genres meet to collaborate together. Is that a fair
That's
statement?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And you know, and it takes being adaptable. It takes being uncomfortable as well. We had one person in the group in Switzerland who definitely was a little bit less comfortable with the sort of chaos that can quickly ensue when musicians are put together in, you know, within four walls. it gets very loud. It gets very like people talking over one another, and people, this person's trying to explain something to that person, and then someone over here is like practicing something super loud, and it's just very chaotic. And I noticed that there was one person in the group who really got stressed out by that and kind of kept insisting, okay, guys, like let's take a deep breath, guys, let's calm down. And it was quite helpful actually that this person did that for the group, because it helped us all calm down and center our focus. But I also was noticing, like, for a lot of people though, like that kind of chaos, it's not a problem. It's just how we do it, I mean, for me, actually, the chaos is also a little bit difficult to focus within. But since I've traveled a lot, I've noticed that just, yeah, depending on where you are in the world and then what group of people you're around, the whole culture around coming together around music is so, so different. And like you said, even within different musical genres, that could all be within one nation, one geographical nation, the classical musicians and then the, more folk musicians are going to behave very differently together. So it's totally a matter of trying to adapt and being considerate of one another's needs, whether that means being considerate of the chaos or being considerate of the person who needs it to be more calm. It's just like anything else, isn't it? You kind of just have to be aware of people and be accommodating, hopefully,
I think you're very considerate. So, few things. Yeah, the Gypsies, from what I understand, have a very rich tradition when it comes to music, and I think that's. I mean, my understanding is there are different pockets of populations that have traveled all around the world, but I think the music is the common denominator. Somehow, the experts have tried to have figured out. That there is that commonality between the music, and actually they've been able to sort of guess as to where their origins are, where did they migrate from. So I think a very, very interesting history there. And you mentioned your fluency in French. You actually have sung a song, at least in part, in French. So I'm a bit surprised to learn that you doubt yourself in terms of your ability to speak French. So tell us about your love with the French language and how you ended up singing that wonderful song that you have, You Are Loved, in part in French.
Yeah. So, well, I will confess that it's not me singing in French in that song, but we'll get to that because I'm sure you'll ask me more about the song since it's going to be on this channel. But yes, as the person who wrote the song, I said I really want part of this song to be in French, and that was what inspired me to invite the artists who collaborated with me on that song, which we'll get to. But I don't know. I think it's a beautiful language, and I think it's beautiful sung. I don't know. It just sounds so beautiful when it's sung, and because I do a lot of music in sort of the Arabic speaking world, and now in the past 5 years became even more interested in North Africa. The French language is also quite prevalent, and I've noticed a lot of artists, some of them stick to singing in Arabic and some of them will blend in with French, or maybe they'll release one song in Arabic and then another in French. So French is quite common, and I thought it would be a really beautiful way to spread the message of love that is in that song in a whole nother language that more people could relate to. But I'm still learning to speak it, and it's quite difficult. I'm like a pronunciation perfectionist, which is probably how I became pretty good at speaking Arabic, because if you're not very technical about the pronunciation, you won't speak the language very well because it's just such a different way of speaking. So for that reason, I'm just not where I want to be with French, because it's totally different. The pronunciation is totally different than what I'm used to. So
I think you just got my bias. I guess I was giving you credit for every voice that I heard on that song. But yeah, it's a great song. So could you just share a little bit about what inspired you to? My understanding is you wrote the song as well. Is that
I did write the song. Yeah.
yeah, and then you performed it. So what was the inspiration behind that song? Because I think the way I look when I heard that song, what came to my mind was when patients tell me how lonely they feel, and they feel like there's nobody with them. I think this is a perfect song for them to hear, when they feel like isolated and lonely. And, not just patients, there are a lot of people who walk amongst us who feel the same way.
And that's so sad, actually, and you're totally right. I mean, even outside of a medical setting, you walk down the street and you have no idea what people are going through on the inside. And when you yourself are in a personal crisis, because who hasn't experienced that to some degree at some point in their life, when you're that person walking down the street and you think, wow, if only the people around me even knew what I was feeling right now, right? So that's a truth about the world we live in. And this song is very close to my heart because I wrote this song for a loved one of mine who was going through kind of a mental health crisis. And I just felt like she needed to know she was loved. And I think also it extends beyond that, because as much as we all suffer from that feeling of loneliness, it's also our job to help other people not feel lonely, you know? Sometimes people could make an even stronger effort to visit the people who are sick in the hospital when you have loved ones. Sometimes you could make more of an effort if you're the person who's fortunate to not be in that suffering position, or even if you are. You can, because the whole ending part of the song says, go and tell the world that they are loved also. So, like, what role do we have as people to make sure people know that they're loved? Sharing that in word and in deed. So the song is both. The song addresses the loved one who's suffering and who needs to know they are loved. And then it's sort of a call to the world to say, and let's not only focus on how much we are loved, but make sure everyone else feels loved as well, if that makes sense.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's a beautiful song and quite a peppy number, actually. It's amazing.
That was the objective.
Yeah,
I wanted it to
yeah.
be catchy.
Yeah, you got the job done very well. Now, I just want to switch gears a little bit. I'm always intrigued by the instrument, the oud that you play, and you have some really fancy ones. Yeah, one looks very modern, not a traditional. It doesn't look traditional at all. It's got a very basic frame with the strings. Can you just tell us as to how not just music is evolving, but instruments are evolving as well?
Well, I certainly can't speak for all instruments. And the oud is, a little bit later to the game when it comes to going electric. But basically, what you're describing is my electric oud. And there's a lot of what's the right word? I don't want to say controversy. That's kind of a strong word. Polemic, discussion out there in the world of oud players about whether electric ouds, are worthy of our attention or not, because the acoustic oud, is so natural. It's all wood and resonation, to the point that even the tuning pegs that you twist to tune the strings are also made of wood, the way like a violin is made of wood. For example, when you compare that to a guitar, a typical guitar, even an acoustic guitar, the tuning pegs are made of metal, and they twist against a small tiny gear system, which makes it way, way easier to tune. And the oud, even that is made of wood. I mean, the only thing not made of wood in an oud is the strings, basically. Anyways, so of course that produces this very natural and ancient sound. I mean, it's a very old instrument. And the art of luthiery, of making ouds, is a coveted art form. It's highly technical, and people spend lifetimes to perfect it, to be able to create the instrument that makes this beautiful sound. So all of that is to say that the acoustic oud will always reign as the number one oud. But because of logistical purposes, really, the electric oud came about because it's much easier to plug an instrument in using like a jack cable rather than put a microphone in front of it. Because when you put a microphone in front of it, the oud is a soft instrument in terms of its volume. And if you have other instruments on the stage that are very loud, you're never going to hear it. And it causes all kinds of feedback and all kinds of technical problems. But if you can plug it in using a cable, like you can with an electric guitar or an electric keyboard or anything else, a bass, it's just going to be a lot easier to amplify the sound. Physically, it's going to be flatter and smaller, so kind of easier to travel around with, in my experience. So that's kind of my sort of explanation of acoustic versus electric. And so I own 3 different electric ouds. 2 of them are by the brand called Godin, which is very famous. It's from Montreal, and they were one of the pioneers in the West to make a beautiful sounding electric oud. Because again, when you make something electric, it's gonna change the quality of the sound. When the guitar went electric, everyone freaked out as well. There's that famous story of Bob Dylan going electric at the Newport Folk Festival, and half the people loved it, half the people were totally, scandalized. So going electric is going to change the sound, and but I believe that it brings with it a lot of opportunities and a lot of positives as well. So you kind of give and take, right? So the Godin, does its very best to create this nice, authentic sound, and I think it does well. And then the most recent one that I have is it's by Silent Oud, Sylent. It's a French oud maker who is making these really cool, artistic looking electric ouds. So the body it's like a long strip of wood with the strings strung across, and purely for aesthetic purposes, you kind of have this like black wire bent metal frame that goes around, and everything else is air. So it's quite see-through if you think about it, right? So I love the aesthetics of it. I also think it achieves a really great sound for an electric oud, and very portable because you can sort of disassemble the thing and put it in this teeny bag and travel. So it's a dream for traveling, which, as you know, I do a lot. And yeah, so those are my ouds. But I currently have an acoustic oud being custom made for me in Turkey, and I'm trying to decide whether I should have it shipped here or make an excuse to go to Turkey and pick it up myself. So I will be adding to my acoustic oud collection very soon.
Fascinating. Yeah, so it seems like things change in the music world too, right? Because I'm in the field of medicine, and as you know, medicine keeps on changing and advancing, and it sounds like similar things happen in your world. Now, before we wind up, Aliya, tell us what's planned. What's your schedule like this year?
It's not as hectic as of now. I have a gig in Madrid, so I'll be going up to Madrid in March. Kind of trying to plan out my summer with different concerts and festivals. So TBA to be announced soon. And I am working on an album, which will be a first full-length album in many years that I've released. I've released a lot of singles lately. I released an EP, which is like a short collection of singles, kind of like a mini album. But I'm trying to go for a full-length album by the end of this year. It takes a long time to make and release an album, so it's not coming anytime super soon, but I am going to start working on it. I already have a lot of the music written. It's just a matter of putting it all together. So also TBA on that.
Yeah, it seems like you're never bored. You always have something to do.
Yes, that's 100% correct. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. So great. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us again, and wish you the very best this particular year and more years to come.
Thank you. I'm wishing the same for you and for all the people that you serve. And I really hope that everyone feels very touched and moved by the message of this song because I wrote it with them in mind. I really did.
Yeah, it's an amazing song. Yeah, I think it's got to be shared as much as possible.
Mm.
Thank you. We'll
Thank you
see
so
you
much.
again soon. Bye.
Thank you.